On a frozen Montana highway in 1997, two teenage sisters vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an idling car and a mystery that would haunt a mother for 25 years. Sarah Chen, 16 and responsible beyond her years, had promised their mother she'd get Amy home safely from the Christmas concert in Billings. Now, as snowflakes caught in their headlights like static on an old television, that promise felt impossibly heavy. The Honda Civic had been making strange noises for the last 30 miles, a grinding sound that Sarah kept telling herself was just the cold. Amy sat curled in the passenger seat, still wearing her red velvet dress from the choir performance, humming fragments of Silent Night under her breath. Her fingers traced patterns in the frost on the window, while Sarah gripped the steering, wheel knuckles white against the cracked vinyl. "Sarah," Amy's voice was small in the darkness, "the engine sounds weird." "I know." Sarah pressed the gas pedal gently, coaxing the car forward through the swirling snow. They were still 40 miles from home, and the highway stretched empty in both directions. No other headlights, no houses, just the endless expanse of Montana, winter pressing against their fragile bubble of warmth. When the engine finally gave up, it happened with a shudder and a sigh like something dying. Sarah guided the car to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking orange against the white landscape. The silence that followed felt enormous. "Mom's going to kill us," Amy whispered. Sarah reached over and squeezed her sister's hand. "No, she won't. We'll figure this out." But her voice carried a tremor she couldn't hide. The cell phone in her purse showed no signal, just an empty battery icon that made her stomach clench. She left the engine running for heat and stepped into the bitter wind to check under the hood, though she knew next to nothing about cars. Amy stayed inside, breath fogging the windows as she watched her sister's silhouette move through the falling snow. That's when the truck driver saw them 20 minutes later. Two girls, he'd tell the police. One outside the car, one inside, alive, waiting. When he passed the same spot on his return trip an hour later, the car sat empty, doors hanging open like broken wings, engine still running, purses still on the seats. But the Chen sisters had vanished into the Montana night, as if they'd never existed at all. The jackhammer's rhythm stopped abruptly, and in the sudden silence, Mike Rodriguez knew something was wrong. 23 years of construction work had taught him to read his crew's body language and the way Tommy stepped back from the concrete, face pale beneath his hard hat, sent ice through Mike's veins. "Boss," Tommy called, his voice tight, "you need to see this." Mike walked across the Denver construction site, boots crunching on broken concrete and rebar. The morning sun cast long shadows between the skeletal remains of what had been the riverside. Apartments until yesterday. Now it was just another demolition job, another step toward the city's relentless march of progress. Tommy pointed into the hole they'd been cutting for new foundation work. "There," he whispered. Mike knelt at the edge and looked down. Beneath layers of concrete and earth, something white caught the light. Not debris, not construction waste. Bone. Jesus. Mike pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. "Nobody touches anything. Rope off this whole section." Detective Lisa Park arrived 40 minutes later, her unmarked sedan weaving between construction vehicles and police cars. At 38, she'd seen enough crime scenes to recognize the particular tension that hung over a site like this. Workers clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. Yellow tape fluttered in the October breeze like prayer flags. Mike met her at the perimeter. "We were breaking up the old foundation when Tommy hit it," he explained, leading her toward the excavation. "Looks like it's been there a long time." Lisa crouched beside the hole, studying the partially exposed remains. The bones were small, delicate, young. Her trained eye caught something else glinting in the dirt nearby. "Can you get me a brush?" she asked the forensic technician setting up equipment. Carefully, she swept dirt away from a small metal object, a class ring tarnished but intact. She photographed it from multiple angles before lifting it with tweezers. The inscription was barely legible after decades underground. Whitmore High School, class of 1999. Lisa's pulse quickened. She'd been working cold cases for 5 years, and something about this felt familiar. Back at her car, she pulled up the database on her laptop, searching graduation years, missing persons reports. There. Sarah Chen. Disappeared, December 23, 1997. Would have graduated in 1999. After 25 years, Sarah Chen was finally ready to come home. Helen Chen was watering the Christmas cactus on her windowsill when the doorbell rang. The plant had belonged to Sarah, a gift from her high school boyfriend that bloomed every December like clockwork. Helen had kept it alive for 25 years, the same way she'd kept hope alive, with stubborn determination and daily attention to details others might forget. The woman at her door held a badge and wore the careful expression Helen had learned to recognize immediately. Another detective, another disappointment waiting to happen. Mrs. Chen, I'm Detective Lisa Park. I'd like to speak with you about your daughters. Helen's hand tightened on the doorframe. They found something. It wasn't a question. After a quarter-century of false leads and dead ends, Helen could read the difference between routine follow-up and real news in an officer's posture. Detective Park's shoulders carried weight. May I come in? Helen led her through the small apartment, past walls covered with missing person flyers that had never been taken down. Sarah and Amy smiled from dozens of photographs, frozen at 16 and 14, their faces watching every conversation Helen had held in this living room for the past 2 decades. Detective Park sat carefully on the edge of the sofa, avoiding the shrine Helen had never bothered to hide or explain. On the coffee table sat Sarah's last report card, Amy's choir program from that final Christmas concert, and a manila folder thick with police reports, private investigator receipts, and psychic consultations Helen wasn't proud of but couldn't regret. We found remains at a construction site downtown, Detective Park said gently, along with a class ring that belonged to Sarah. Helen closed her eyes, and for a moment the room fell completely silent, except for the tick of the kitchen clock that had counted every minute of their absence. Just Sarah? The question came out as barely a whisper. So far. Mrs. Chen, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask, have you kept anything that might help us with DNA identification? Hair from a brush, clothing, anything with biological. Traces. Helen stood without a word and walked to the hallway. She opened the door to what had been the girls' shared bedroom, preserved exactly as they'd left it that December night. 2 beds with faded quilts, 2 dressers with scattered jewelry and hair ties, 2 closets still holding clothes that smelled faintly of teenage perfume and dreams deferred. Take whatever you need, Helen said, her voice steady as granite. But, Detective Park? This doesn't end with Sarah. My Amy is still out there. The first call came 3 days after Sarah's remains were identified. Detective Lisa Park was reviewing forensic reports when her desk phone rang, the sharp tone cutting through the quiet hum of the precinct. Detective Park. She tucked the phone against her shoulder, continuing to scan DNA confirmation documents. Silence. Stretched for several seconds, long enough that Lisa almost hung up. Then a voice spoke, soft and careful, like someone testing the weight of each word. You found Sarah. Lisa straightened, pen freezing mid-note. Who is this? That's not important. What matters is that you're looking in the wrong place for answers. The voice was female, mature but not elderly. There was something deliberate about the cadence, as if the caller had rehearsed this conversation. If you have information about the Chen case, Highway 89 past Glacier Falls. There's an old logging access road, maybe 8 miles from where you found the car. Look for the camp. The line went dead. Lisa stared at the phone, her pulse quickening. She grabbed a pen and scribbled down every detail she could remember about the voice, the background sounds, the exact words. Highway 89 was in Montana, where the girls had disappeared. But logging camps had been abandoned for decades. Her computer chimed with a new email. The sender was listed as Winter Solstice 1997 to tempmail.com. The message contained only 2 lines. Sarah never made it to the camp. The other one did. Winter Lisa printed the email immediately, then tried to trace the account. Dead end. Temporary email service, accessed through a VPN that bounced through 3 different countries. 2 days later, she was getting coffee at the shop near her apartment when her cell phone buzzed. Unknown number. Detective Park. You haven't looked yet. The same voice, clearer this time. I'm working on it. I need more than just... December 23rd wasn't random. He was watching them. He knew their route. Knew they'd have to take that road because of the weather. Sarah fought him. That's why she didn't survive the first night. Lisa's coffee grew cold in her hands. Who is he? Give me a name. Find the camp first. Then you'll understand why I can't. Wait. But the line was already dead. Lisa sat in the coffee shop for another hour, replaying the conversation. The caller knew details that hadn't been released to the media, details that only someone who was there could know. That evening, another. Email arrived. I've been waiting 25 years to tell someone. I just need to know you won't stop looking. Winter Lisa typed her response carefully. I won't stop. But I need your help. The reply came within minutes. Montana State Police have the old logging permits. Reference file LG 1997-44B. Ask them about Dale Kruger. Lisa was already reaching for her phone before she finished reading. The logging road had been reclaimed by 25 years of Montana wilderness, but tire tracks from the search vehicles now carved fresh scars through undergrowth that whispered secrets. Detective Lisa Park stood at the edge of what had once been a work camp, her breath forming small clouds in the thin mountain air. There, said Officer Martinez, pointing through a stand of pine trees. Looks like a structure. The cabin squatted, in a clearing like something trying to hide. Weathered logs, a collapsed section of roof, windows boarded with plywood that had warped and split. But someone had reinforced the door recently. Heavy padlocks hung from metal hasps that looked decades newer than the building itself. Lisa's forensic photographer documented everything before they breached the entrance. The smell hit them first. Decay, mold, and something else. Something human that had lingered too long in a confined space. Inside, the single room had been divided by hanging blankets, creating smaller spaces. A makeshift kitchen occupied one corner, camping equipment, canned goods with dates spanning multiple years. Against the far wall, a mattress lay on the floor, stained and torn. Detective. The forensics specialist was kneeling near what had been a sleeping area. You need to see this. She'd pried up several floorboards, revealing a hidden space beneath. Lisa crouched beside her, shining her flashlight into the gap. Personal items were scattered in the cavity. Children's clothing, a broken watch, a small leather journal. Lisa pulled on gloves and carefully lifted the journal. The cover was water-damaged but intact. On the first page, in handwriting she recognized from school reports in Helen Chen's manila folder, were 3 words. Amy Chen, Winter 1997. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. Entry after entry in a 14-year-old script, documenting days that stretched into weeks, then months. Day 12. He says Sarah is sick and can't see me yet. I don't believe him anymore. Day 38. I think Sarah is dead. The way he looked when I asked about her, I have to stop asking. Day 127, he brought me new clothes today. Says I'm being good. Says if I keep being good, maybe I can see my mom again. I don't want to be good anymore. Lisa closed the journal, her chest tight. 25 years later, and Amy's voice still echoed from these pages, young and terrified, and desperately hoping someone would find her words. There's more, the forensic specialist said quietly. She held up a small plastic bag containing what looked like carved wood. Initials, AC and DK, cut into the wall behind the mattress, Dale. Kruger, the name Winter had given her, was carved into this nightmare alongside Amy's initials. Lisa stepped outside, needing air, needing space to process what they'd found. Amy Chen had been here, had survived here. But for how long? Detective Lisa Park spread the diary's photocopied pages across the conference table like evidence of a crime that defied comprehension. The forensic analyst had treated each page with preservation chemicals, but Amy's words remained as raw as the day they were written. Helen Chen sat across from her, hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. You said she survived. 4 years, Lisa confirmed softly. Helen, some of this is going to be difficult to hear. Helen's jaw set with the same determination Lisa had seen when she'd opened her daughter's preserved bedroom. I've been living with difficult for 25 years. Tell me what happened to my girls. Lisa opened to the first entry, dated 3 days after the disappearance. Amy's handwriting was shaky, the letters pressed deep into the paper. He says, "Sarah hit her head when the car broke down. Says she's sleeping in another cabin, but I can't see her because she needs quiet. I asked why we can't just call Mom, and he got angry. His face changed and I got scared." The entries painted a picture of calculated manipulation. Dale Kruger had convinced Amy that Sarah was recovering elsewhere, that their parents thought they were dead, that the outside world had given up searching. He fed her just enough hope to keep her compliant while slowly erasing her connection to everything she'd known. Day 67. I asked about school and he said I don't need school anymore. Said he's teaching me everything I need to know. Today, he showed me how to make rabbit snares. I don't want to learn, but I'm hungry. Lisa watched. Helen's face as she read saw the mother processing each revelation like physical blows. Months turned into years in Amy's careful documentation. She wrote about learning to survive, about growing taller and stronger, about the day she finally understood that Sarah was never coming back. Day 892. Found Sarah's necklace in his toolbox. Today. The one with our birthstones that Mum gave her for Christmas. It was broken. I think I've been lying to myself for a long time. She was there for over 2 years, Lisa said gently. Helen looked up from the pages, tears streaming down her cheeks. How did she get away? Lisa turned to the final entries, where Amy's handwriting had become more confident, more determined. Day 247. He's getting sicker. Coughing all the time, sleeping more. Yesterday he forgot to lock the door. I pretended not to notice. Day 1251. Tonight. When he takes his medicine, he sleeps heavy. I've been practicing the trail in my head. I know which way leads down. The last entry was dated nearly 3 years after the disappearance. If someone finds this, I'm alive. I'm going home. Tell my mum I never stopped believing she was looking for me. Amy Chen, December 15th, 2000. Helen pressed her hands to her mouth. She escaped. My baby girl escaped and came home. Lisa's heart clenched. This was the part she'd been dreading. Helen, there's no record of Amy returning home. No missing person report was ever closed. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then where, Helen whispered, is my daughter? The phone? Mountain town of Glacier Falls had the tired look of a place that had watched its purpose disappear with the logging industry. Detective Lisa Park pulled into the gravel parking lot of Murphy's Diner, where Sheriff Tom Bradley had agreed to meet her. The building's red vinyl booths and faded checkerboard floor hadn't changed since the 1980s, and neither had its owner. Martha Murphy poured coffee without being asked, her weathered hands steady despite her 70-something years. "You're here about Dale Kruger," she said before Lisa could introduce herself. Sheriff Bradley, a lean man with tired eyes, nodded grimly. Word travels fast in a town this size. Martha knew Dale better than most. He fixed things, Martha said, settling into the booth across from them. Furnaces, broken steps, leaky roofs, quiet man. Kept to himself mostly, but there was something. She paused, searching for words. Something off about how he looked at young women, made folks uncomfortable. Lisa pulled out a notepad. When did he stop coming around? Winter of 2000, Martha said without hesitation. Right around Christmas. Just disappeared one day. Left his toolbox at the Hendersons' place when he was fixing their porch. Never came back for it. Sheriff Bradley leaned forward. That's not the strangest part. Dale had been renting that old logging camp from the state since '95. Paid cash, always on time. But after he vanished, we found out he'd been using a fake name for the lease. What was his real name? We never found out. The man calling himself. Dale Kruger didn't exist before 1992. No birth certificate, no social security number that matched his age and description. Whoever he was, he'd been running from something for years before he came here. Lisa felt pieces clicking into place. Were there other disappearances, other young women? Martha and Sheriff Bradley exchanged glances. "Show her the files," Martha said quietly. At the sheriff's office, Bradley spread out case folders dating back to the early 1990s. 5 young women, ages 16 to 22, had vanished from the surrounding counties over an 8-year period. All had been traveling alone or in pairs. All had last been seen on remote highways during winter months. We never connected them to Dale at the time, Bradley admitted. Different counties, different jurisdictions. But looking back now, he pointed to dates on the reports. They all disappeared during periods when Dale was supposedly away on family business. He'd leave town for weeks, sometimes months. Lisa studied the photographs of the missing women. Young faces, hopeful smiles, lives cut short. Any of them ever found? One, Rebecca Torres, disappeared in '96. Her body was discovered the following spring, about 10 miles from Dale's camp. Coroner ruled it exposure, but there were signs of prolonged captivity. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. Dale, Kruger had been hunting for years before he'd found Sarah and Amy Chen on that snowy highway. The isolated logging camp wasn't just a hiding place, it was a carefully prepared prison. "There's something else," Bradley said, pulling out a final folder. "We got a call in January 2001, about a month after Dale disappeared. Young woman, maybe early 20s, asking about him. Wanted to know if he was dead." Lisa's pulse quickened. Did she give a name? Said her name was Winter. When we asked why she wanted to know, she hung up. Outside the sheriff's office, Lisa sat in her car, staring at the mountain peaks that surrounded this small town. Somewhere, in those woods, Amy Chen had spent 3 years as Dale Kruger's prisoner, and then somehow she had escaped and made sure he'd never hurt anyone again. The question now was whether Winter was ready to stop running. She watched from the coffee shop across the street as Detective Park entered the Denver Police Building for the 3rd consecutive morning. The woman calling herself Winter Stevens had been observing the investigation's progress with the careful attention of someone whose life depended on getting it right. Amy Chen, though she hadn't used that name in 25 years, sat by the window nursing the same cup of coffee for an hour, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. At 39, she bore little resemblance to the 14-year-old girl who'd vanished on a Montana highway. Her dark hair was shorter now, streaked with premature gray. Crow's feet mapped the years of looking over her shoulder, of starting over in new cities whenever the nightmares got too loud. Detective Park emerged from the building, carrying a manila folder thick with documents. Amy recognized her own diary. Among the papers, the photocopied pages she'd hidden beneath the cabin floorboards all those years ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched the detective climb into her unmarked sedan. For 3 weeks, Amy had been leaving breadcrumbs. Anonymous phone calls from different locations, email addresses that led nowhere. Each contact carefully, calculated to test whether this Detective Park could be trusted with the truth that had kept Amy running for 25 years. Her phone buzzed. A Google alert for Dale Kruger, Montana. The news articles were multiplying daily now. The discovery of Sarah's remains had reopened not just her case, but several others. Amy read about Rebecca Torres, about the other missing women. Confirmation. Salve what she'd always suspected, but been too afraid to investigate. She wasn't Dale's only victim, just the one who'd gotten away. Amy pulled out a burner phone and dialed the number she'd memorized from Detective Park's business card. When the familiar voice answered, Amy almost hung up as she had so many times before. "Detective Park." "You found the diary." Amy's voice was steadier than she felt. A pause. "Winter, you read about the other women, the ones before Sarah and me." "Yes, I'm starting to understand the pattern. Winter, I need you to know. Dale Kruger. Can't hurt anyone anymore. The camp's been empty for decades." Amy closed her eyes. This was the moment she'd been building toward since she'd seen Sarah's name in the news. "I know he can't hurt anyone anymore. How can you be sure?" The words came out in a whisper. "Because I killed him." Silence stretched across the phone line like a bridge neither of them was ready to cross. "Winter," Detective Park said finally, her voice gentle. "Where are you?" Amy looked across the street at the police building, at the detective standing outside it now, phone pressed to her ear. Their eyes met through the coffee shop window, and for the first time in 25 years, Amy Chen didn't run. "I'm right here," she said. "I've been waiting to see if you'd believe me." Detective Park raised her hand in a small wave. Amy, despite everything, found herself waving back. The ranger's GPS led them through 2 miles of dense forest before they reached what remained of Dale Kruger's final hiding place. Detective Lisa Park stood at the edge of a blackened circle where a cabin had once stood, the forest having slowly reclaimed the burned ground over 15 years. Fire department report from January 2001 said it was an electrical fault, Ranger. Davis explained, consulting his tablet. But they didn't investigate too thoroughly. Remote location, no insurance claim, and honestly, folks were glad to see the place gone. Lisa walked the perimeter of the burn site, noting how completely the structure had been consumed. Even the foundation stones were cracked from intense heat. Her forensics team worked methodically, sifting through debris that had been buried. Under years of fallen leaves and mountain weather, Detective, called Sarah Martinez, the lead forensic investigator, found something you need to see. She knelt beside what had been the cabin's front door area, brushing dirt away from a collection of melted metal objects. Padlocks, heavy-duty ones, industrial grade. Look at the placement. Lisa crouched down, studying the twisted remains. The locks had been positioned on the inside of the door, not the outside. He was locked in. That's what it looks like, and there's this. Sarah held up a small, partially melted can. Accelerant, gasoline by the smell that's left, poured liberally throughout the interior before ignition. The picture forming in Lisa's mind was methodical, deliberate. Someone had trapped Dale Kruger inside his own cabin and burned it down around him. Time of death. Based on the fire department report and newspaper archives, the blaze was spotted on January 18, 2001. Remote location meant it burned for hours before anyone noticed the smoke. Lisa pulled out Amy's diary, flipping to the final entries. December 15, 2000 was Amy's last written date, her planned escape. 34 days later, Dale Kruger had died screaming in a fire that left no doubt about its intentional nature. "Over here," called another team member from deeper in the ruins. "Looks like a root cellar or storage area that partially survived. The underground space had been crude but functional, with concrete walls that had withstood the fire's heat." Inside, they found more evidence of Dale's preparation. Shelves lined with canned goods, boxes of clothing in various sizes, and most disturbing of all, a collection of personal items that clearly belonged to different victims. "Trophies," Sarah said grimly, photographing a box containing jewelry, driver's licenses, and photographs. This guy was organized. He'd been at this for years. Among the items, Lisa found something that made her blood run cold. A small plastic bag containing locks of hair, each labeled with dates spanning nearly a decade. Sarah Chen's name was written on one bag in Dale's careful handwriting. He was escalating, Lisa murmured, getting bolder. But someone had stopped him. Someone had walked into this remote cabin, locked Dale inside, and burned away the evidence of his crimes along with the man himself. The question was whether that someone had been a terrified 19-year-old girl acting in self-defense, or something more calculated. Lisa's phone buzzed. A text message from the number Winter had been using. "Some fires are necessary. Some monsters don't deserve trials." She looked around at the burn site, at the evidence of systematic predation that had been cleansed by flame 15 years ago. Winter, Amy, was ready to tell her side of the story. Lisa just hoped she was prepared to hear it. January 18, 2001. Amy Chen pressed herself against the cabin wall, listening to Dale's labored breathing from the main room. At 19, she had learned to read the rhythms of his sickness, the way his coughing fits came in waves, how the medication made him sleep deeper, but also made him more unpredictable when awake. She had been free for over a month now, living in the abandoned ranger station 3 miles down the mountain, but she couldn't leave, not yet. Not while he was still alive to hurt others. The photographs she'd found in his root cellar had changed everything. Rebecca Torres, smiling at a high school graduation. Lisa Manning posing by a lake. Other girls whose names she'd never learned. All reduced to trophies in his collection. All dead because no one had stopped him. Amy slipped inside through the back door, the one he'd never properly fixed after her escape. Dale sat hunched over his kitchen table, surrounded by pill bottles and empty whiskey glasses. The illness that had weakened him enough for her to run was consuming him slowly, but not fast enough. "I wondered when you'd come back," he said without turning around. His voice was a rasp, worn down by months of coughing. "Thought you might be hungry." "I'm not hungry anymore." Amy's voice was steady, surprising her. The terrified 14-year-old girl who'd arrived here 3 years ago was gone. "I know about the others." Dale turned slowly, and she saw how the disease had hollowed his cheeks, how his eyes had sunk deeper into his skull. But the predator was still there, watching her with the same calculating patience. "Others?" He smiled, showing teeth stained by medication and neglect. "You're the only one who mattered, Amy. The only one who lasted. Rebecca Torres lasted, until you killed her." His smile faded. "That was different. She tried to run too early. You were smarter." Amy pulled the gasoline can from behind her back, the same one she'd found in his storage shed. "I was luckier." Dale's eyes widened, but his weakened body couldn't move fast enough. Amy began pouring, the sharp smell of fuel filling the small space. He struggled to stand, reaching for the door, but she'd already secured it from the outside during her reconnaissance. "The police will never know," she said, stepping toward the window she'd left unlocked. "But I'll know, and so will they." She struck the match as Dale pounded weakly on the door, his voice rising to a scream that was quickly swallowed by the roar of flames. Amy climbed through the window and walked into the dark forest without looking back. Behind her, orange light danced between the trees, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she could breathe. The girl named Amy Chen died in that fire too, leaving only Winter to walk down the mountain and disappear into a world that had given up looking for her. Helen Chen was folding Sarah's choir robe when the phone rang. 25 years of washing and pressing the navy fabric had worn it soft as tissue paper, but she couldn't bring herself to put it away. Not when Amy was still out there somewhere, still coming home. She answered on the 3rd ring, expecting Detective Park with another update about the investigation. "Mom." The word hit Helen like a physical blow. She sank onto the couch, the choir robe falling from her trembling hands. The voice was older, worn by years she'd never witnessed, but underneath it all was something unmistakable. Her baby girl. Amy. It came out as barely a whisper. "I saw the news. About Sarah. About what they found." Amy's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I couldn't save her." Helen pressed her free hand to her mouth, trying to hold back 25 years of grief and hope and desperate love. "Where are you, baby? Where have you been?" "I couldn't come home." The words tumbled out in a rush. "After I got away, I wanted to. I started walking toward town, and I got as far as the main road, and I just froze. I had blood on my hands, Mom. I had done things." "What things? Honey, what happened up there?" Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of secrets Amy had carried alone for so long. "I killed him," Amy whispered. "The man who took us. I burned down his cabin with him inside it. Sarah was already gone, but he had pictures of other girls. So many other girls. And I knew if I let him live, he'd just keep taking them." Helen closed her eyes, seeing in her mind's eye the terrified 14-year-old who'd sung in the church choir, who'd helped fold laundry and did her homework at the kitchen table. "You were protecting yourself. You were protecting others." I was 19 and I was a killer, and I didn't know how to explain that to anyone. I didn't know how to come home and pretend to be normal when I could still smell the smoke. You could have told me. You could have trusted me. I was afraid you'd look at me differently. I was afraid you'd see what I'd become instead of who I used to be." Helen's voice broke. "All I've ever wanted was to see you again, any version of you. I don't care what you had to do to survive." "I watched the news for years," Amy said. "I saw you at the vigils holding my picture. I wanted to call so many times, but I thought maybe it was better if you remembered me as I was. Before." "Before what?" "Before I learned how to kill someone and sleep soundly afterward." Helen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where she'd watched for Amy's return every day for 25 years. "Where are you now?" she asked. "Close," Amy said. "I'm close, Mum. But I need you to know I'm not the little girl who left with Sarah that night. I'm someone else now." "I don't care who you are now," Helen said fiercely. "You're my daughter. You're my Amy, And I've been waiting. The bench in Riverside Park had been Helen's suggestion. Public enough, to feel safe, quiet enough for the conversation they needed to have. Amy sat 3 feet away from her mother, close enough to touch but still maintaining the careful distance that 25 years of separation had taught her. In daylight, Helen could see how completely her daughter had changed. The soft curves of adolescence had been carved away by years of survival, leaving sharp cheekbones and wary eyes that scanned the park automatically, noting exits and potential threats. But when Amy smiled, tentatively like someone testing forgotten muscles, Helen caught glimpses of the girl who used to hum while doing dishes. "You look like your father," Helen said softly. "I remember him better now. Funny how memories come back when you're not running from them." Detective Park approached carefully, giving them space to acknowledge her presence. "I wanted to let you know," she said to Amy, "there won't be any charges. Given the circumstances, the DA considers Dale Kruger's death justified homicide." Amy nodded but didn't look relieved. Justice, Helen realized, wasn't what her daughter needed anymore. She'd delivered her own justice 15 years ago. "There's something else," Detective Park continued. "We found evidence that ties Kruger to 8 other disappearances across 3 states. Your actions likely saved countless lives." "It doesn't. Bring Sarah back," Amy said quietly. "No," Helen agreed, "but it stops anyone else from losing their Sarah." Later, they drove to Mountain View Cemetery, where Helen had finally been able to bury Sarah's remains. The headstone was simple granite, engraved with dates that bookended a life cut impossibly short. Amy knelt and placed her hand on the stone, her lips moving in words Helen couldn't hear but recognized as the kind of conversation sisters have when no one else is listening. "I told her about the escape," Amy said when she stood. "About how I wished she could have come with me. About how I've been carrying her voice with me all these years." Helen took her daughter's hand, scarred now but still recognizably the fingers that had once braided friendship bracelets and practiced piano scales. "What happens now?" Amy asked. "Now we learn how to be a family again. Different than before, but still family." Amy squeezed her mother's hand. "I'd like that. I'd like to remember who Amy Chen was before she became Winter." "Amy Chen is whoever you choose to be now," Helen said, "but you don't have to choose alone." As they walked back toward the car, Amy looked over her shoulder once more at Sarah's grave. Some winters end slowly, but when they do, what grows back is stronger for having survived the cold.